recent murder of 2 British soldiers and a policeman in Northern Ireland has once again raised the issue of the Westminster government, devolution and its role in the UK. Young people in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland have now had a considerable degree of political power for their own local areas. The Scots and the Welsh, they've had that power now for over 10 years, whereas the youngsters in Northern Ireland, they've had to wait until the last 2 years to be able to influence politicians in their local area. And we wanted to know, how has all this impacted young people's lives and changed it for the better? So we've been along to speak to Alistair Carmichael, who's the Liberal Democrat Shadow Secretary for Scotland and Northern Ireland, who's had a chat to us about what it all involves. OK, well, we're here with Alistair Carmichael, who's the Liberal Democrat Shadow Secretary for Scotland and Northern Ireland, also the MP for Orkney and Shetland. Alistair, thanks very much for talking to us today. First off, can you explain to us what devolution has involved, what it's meant for younger people? Well, in mechanical terms, it has brought decision-making much closer to the communities that were directly affected by it. That was always the purpose of the setting up of a Scottish Parliament, a Welsh Assembly, Northern Ireland Assembly, even a London Assembly. And it does mean that government is that much more accessible. This is true not just for young people, but it's true for people of all ages. That has been the most significant change. I think also it's brought with it, though, a new political culture, one which is much more accessible, which actually is much more willing to listen and actively to go out from Parliament and to seek the views of the people in the communities. And I think, personally speaking, that's an entirely healthy way of doing politics. Devolution has been an empowering process for individual voters, and it has engaged with individual voters, and this I think is something that is relevant to young people in particular, because young people in Scotland, I think, see the Scottish Parliament as being very much their parliament for their generation, and it's something that they can engage with much more easily. But that's not just because it's devolved. It's because it's set up in a way that actually truly reflects opinion within the community. What effects might young people have noticed on their lives as a result of having their own assemblies across the UK? Well, to take the Scottish example, one of the most obvious examples is that the first Scottish government, the first Scottish executive, abolished tuition fees for students in higher education. Now, that was an enormous issue in Scotland. It was an enormous issue across the rest of the country as well. But it was something, because the Parliament was set up so that no individual party would have overall control unless they had more than 50% of the vote. The only way in which the Labour Party could form a government in Scotland was by setting up a coalition government with my own party, the Liberal Democrats. The price of our cooperation with setting up that first Scottish government was that tuition fees should be abolished and that maintenance grants should be introduced for students who needed help financially. I think that's a significant difference. Now, because the range of issues is both in terms of the actual of issues and the geographical spread, that there's more time given to the decision-making process. As a consequence, the decisions themselves tend to be better. And of course, we've started with a clean sheet of paper in setting up the systems. So there is more opportunity for people to feed into the process. OK, if we could just touch on Northern Ireland briefly. We've just heard 2 British soldiers have been murdered over there. Also, a policeman has been murdered. What effect might this have on the future of a devolved government in Northern Ireland, and how do you think young people might notice effects on their lives over there? Well, I think the current situation in Northern Ireland, where you've seen these quite horrific murders of serving soldiers and police officers, or a police officer, could have a very profound effect. I see it both as a threat and as an opportunity. And it depends on how the devolved assembly in Northern Ireland responds. It's just how that is going to develop. So far, the response has been very good and very positive. So far, in fact, the democratic structures have been seen
as being the ones that have got the legitimate voice and not the terrorists who have perpetrated these acts. Now, I don't know how this is going to develop. None of us actually do. But it's pretty clear that there's a choice for people in Northern Ireland. And the choice is whether they move forward with a peace process that has a democratic assembly at the heart of it, or whether they're going to go backwards into a sort of chaotic and violent dispute of the sort that they have just emerged from after 30 years. Now that has a profound effect on everyone's lives, but especially young people's lives in Northern Ireland.
So, we've heard now what devolution is, what it involves and how it impacts on young people's lives across the UK. Now we want to know from you out there in these different parts of the country what it means in your lives. Drop a line to us at catch21.co.uk.